Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, editor-in-chief, and today we're talking about a topic that I think is very popular amongst restoration contractors, and that's do we do TPA or no TPA, or do we do a mix of TPA and no TPA? What does it look like? So my special guest, Nate Cisney, is going to talk about all of that. If you don't know much about Nate, he is the partner and consultant at RMS. Welcome, Nate.
Welcome. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I've been trying for years, so I'm glad I finally made
Yes,
it.
we're so happy to have you. I've worked with you since I started at R&R, almost 2 years ago now. Wow, that's so crazy.
That's
And
crazy.
we've talked about so many different things in the last 2 years. And one that I think we talked about for quite some time in our last couple of conversations was just TPA or no TPA, because it's such a controversial topic, but it's a crucial part of our industry. So let's just dive in. So for contractors who are weighing, do I go TPA or do I not go TPA? What's the real trade-off between the long-term profitability and short-term job volume?
Yeah, that's that great question for sure. As you and I have talked, right? And it's a great debate. And I know some people will probably agree with some of the stuff I say, some of them will disagree, and that's okay because I don't think there's ever a true right or wrong answer. But when we do look at TPAs, I try to tell all of our clients, you still have to look at things open-minded. So there's definitely negatives, there's definitely positives to all of it. And the question comes down to what are you willing to put up with and what are you willing to live with? And I think that's probably the bigger decision that people should look at is based upon those things. As far as profitability goes, I tell everybody, and when I give this analogy, they always kind of go, "Oh, I guess you're right." But Belfour, Blue Sky, ATI, if you look at the biggest guys out there, they're on TPA programs, and you can't tell me that these billion-dollar companies, most of them are almost a billion now in total sales, they wouldn't be doing TPA for free. Let's put it that way, right?
Yeah.
So if you have your biggest competitors in the market who are still doing TPAs, then I just tell my clients and everybody else, is there a reason why they're still on TPA programs? And that would be the question I would just tell everybody. Why are they still on those programs?
Well, I think that's a really important question to ask too, because it's no different than anything else you implement into your business, right? There is going to be a spot for it, but the way you leverage it, is it 10% of your business? Is it 90% of your business? I think that's where you really dive into the minutia, if you will. Every single company is going to vary. Some people are going to be very heavy in TPA work and some people aren't, and that's okay, right? That's what fits their
Absolutely.
business model. And I think the analogy you use is beautiful because I think, to your point, even the bigger companies in the space are still on TPA programs. And that's that's really important to understand is again, they know where it fits in their business. Now it's your turn to see where it fits into your business, right? So at what point does the contractor's reputation, performance, data, and market presence shift from the power dynamic with the TPA? And how do you recognize when you've reached that point? Again, it varies for everybody, but what would you say to somebody, really contemplating that right now?
Yeah, and I think that is that million-dollar question is do you take the dive in or do you not? And I think there's a couple aspects that I would bring up that everybody should look at if you're not currently on TPAs and thinking about getting on them. Number one is what's your status with your work volume right now? I've had clients that have been with us for 2 or 3 years who absolutely swore they'd never do TPA work ever because the market was great 2 or 3 years ago. And now I've got a lot of my clients today who are going, "Hey, Nate, which TPA should I join? I think I need to join a TPA because work is slow." Right.
Yeah.
So I will say people's opinions have changed because when you have no work, you start trying to figure out, well, where else can I get work from? So that would be one decision is your current volume of work where you need it to be? If it's not, you probably need to consider looking at them at a bare minimum.
Hmm.
If your work volume is where you want it to be, then don't bother unless all of your work is coming from one specific source and you know that you need to differentiate and you need to create a variety of where your revenue streams are coming from, then I'd say, okay, if that's the case, even though your volume is where you want it to be, if we got all of our eggs in one basket, we do need to look at other areas where we can divide out that work in case you lose that major account, right? And then TPA would help out with that. So I think those would be a couple of things that I would look at. The other one is your company set up to be able to handle it, right? Meaning TPA work takes a lot of coordination and a lot of work. There's a lot of requirements that you have to do. And so if you're a one or two man band, you may be shooting yourself in the foot by joining a TPA because if you can't quote unquote do all the coordinating that is necessary to keeping all their metrics and all of their tick sheets and all that stuff, you're just going to shoot yourself in the foot because you won't keep up with the performance, which means you're never going to get assignments for jobs anyways. And so it's not, it's not going to benefit you. So I think those would be, and there's many others, but those would probably be two or three big things that I'd say you need to make sure you're okay with those types of things if you're going to look at a TPA.
Yeah, and I would definitely say too, you get all of the requirements before you have to say yes or no, right? Too, so you do know what you're signing yourself up for success or failure, honestly, and that's just really what it
Yes.
comes down to. And I think you can leverage TPAs as a proactive tool in your business, right? To your point, what you just used is, hey, if you know that something's going to go away as far as business, and you know that TPAs will provide you with work and consistent work, then why wouldn't you start to implement that into your every day-to-day, operation so that when that, you know, job does stop or those jobs do stop, you still have a safety net where you're able to understand the requirements, but use it to your benefit, not just for you and your team, but your business, right?
Absolutely.
So, I think a lot of people ask, do TPAs really help the contractors? What does that look like? And of course, it comes down to opinion and then data, of course, how it works for your business. So, do they help them, operate a little bit more professionally and consistency, or do they force standardization at the expense of craftsmanship? And I say that loosely because really, they can help you find some major flaws in your business with the standardization and requirements that they have, and you otherwise may have not found them. So I don't really think that they force us to stay in like this bubble, but I think that they can help you enhance your business. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you in the fact that as much as most of us, there's very few people I know that say they like TPAs, if we're just being totally honest, right? But what I will say is the TPA does force us to better our business operations, no matter how you look at it. The SOPs that they have and all of the LSAs that they have that you need to fulfill, it really should be what we're all striving for to be better as business owners, right? And so I like the fact that it gave me guidelines that I could use with, I'll say in this case, mitigation crews of, hey guys, on every job, we're going to need this, 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 and this, no ifs, ands, or buts. And so it really tightens things down, which ultimately I do believe should lead to greater profitability. Now, when I say greater profitability, I'm not saying with TPAs, I'm saying greater profitability within your organization because you are now running your jobs more efficiently, you're documenting better, you're justifying your bill better so that if you have to defend it, believe it or not, TPAs are making us defend our jobs better, right? Because we have to have our moisture readings, we have to have our photos, we have to have our sketches, we have to have our uploads. So, in all reality, if we go to a non-TPA job, we will have a better documented job that probably will allow us to justify our billing much better than if we were not keeping those SLAs and all those requirements. So I'm more in favor that it's a great training tool for all of us to be better as owners and our operations with how we're running our people.
Well, I would definitely say too, if we're looking at the way TPAs serve us and then we serve the customer at the end of the day, that's a lot of differentiating processes and procedures that they have to look at. And so if they're trying to push standardization or requirements, to your point, they're trying to implement something that we would use on everyday job,
Sure.
regardless of TPA or non-TPA work. And so again, I think it's something to your point, if we know that it goes through the TPA process smoothly, then we should know that if we go to a job that's non-TPA, it will still continue through the process smoothly and or should go through
Yes.
smoothly, right? If we're doing it right. And I think it's really important to remember that, yes, we do know what we're signing up for.
Yeah,
But yes, it can also teach us some things that we maybe otherwise have overlooked or rushed in the past. And so I think that there's pros and cons to everything that we do in this industry, let's be real, and
yeah,
TPAs are no different. So
absolutely.
you know, I think this is a question strategy wise that everybody probably asks. How can established contractors use TPAs strategically without becoming dependent on them or allowing, pricing and scope controls to dictate their business models? And we've talked about this in great length, and I can't wait for you to share this right now. But I really want people to take a second and listen to everything that you have to say on the way that you can strategically leverage TPAs.
Yes. Um, so I'll talk about the ones that are not as important. And then the final one that you and I talked about prior, I'll really kind of hang my hat on that one. So, number one, uh, people say I can't make money on TPAs or that, there's price fixing and whatever you want to call it, because I'm not going to argue either one of those. I think they are controlling us for sure, right? There's no doubt about it. That's why they exist. But with my company, we were able to run profitably off of TPA work. There's no question about it. Now, I hated a lot of their stuff. I couldn't stand some of their arguments, some of their justifications. I thought a lot of it was bogus, right? But at the end of the day, you have contractor and you have carrier or contractor TPA. And somebody told me this, and I think they said it best. The TPA knows that we're going to find ways to get around things to still make money, and we know that we're going to find things to get around theirs. And we've almost said, as long as we both kind of get what we want, because we know there's going to give some give and take, we are just both know there will be ways that we get around things. Insurance is going to get around ways with us. We're going to get away around with ways with them. Right.
Yeah.
So whether we want to call that a negotiation or whatever term you want to put in the middle of that, I've got a client who went from a job average for mitigation, at 27, 2,800. We really focus down on their billing. Now, keep in mind, they're in a different location. Some people think that's a very low average, which is what it is. But we got them up to 5,000. And the way we were able to do that on the mitigation was using specialty drying equipment, but justifying why we used it, because TPAs will allow it, but you have to have justification for it, right? Then
Mhm.
being able to document and be able to put all the equipment on. So believe it or not, and making sure you have good documentation. So everybody says, well, it's only 3 days. Well, I've got clients that are getting away with 5 and 6 days of drying, but it's justified, it's documented.
Yeah.
So there are ways to quote unquote, if you want to call it beat the system that we will be using. There's things that the TPAs will use on us that don't allow us to bill for it, but there's those workarounds, and you have to be willing to spend the time to know what those are. But most of us spend our time complaining and just submitting to their will. And I don't think that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're owners of companies. We're still professionals. There is a way to do it and
Mhm.
still be profitable. And I think that's why the big companies are still doing it because they are making money. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind too, when people don't like TPAs, which I don't like TPAs, but you got to realize the benefits of a TPA. Number one, they're sending you work for free if you really think about it. If I have to go hire a sales rep, I'm going to be paying that sales rep probably base salary 60 to 80K, and then I'm going to have to pay them commissions. Half of our sales reps never produce, right? I get to work with a lot of them, and unfortunately, most of them never bring in enough revenue to justify what they're getting paid. So that's an automatic loss that you have no matter what. Then you've got internet and you got plumbers. Well, internet leads are close to $1,000 to $1,200, depending upon what part of the region you're in. You're a 50-50 chance that you might close that job, but whether you do or don't, it's $1,000 you're going to get dinged, right?
Right.
So that's a big risk. It's like, well, what's my budget? Am I willing to do a 5,000, 10,000, $20,000 budget? So all of those items come at a very high risk in hopes of a reward. TPA, you do nothing. Literally nothing. You get an email assignment from them, or they call you up and say, we have a new job. You're going to pay them 5 to 7%. But I will tell you what, my close rate with TPA work was like 98%. I will pay 5 or 7% all day long because I only pay to play. If I get
Mhm.
the job, they're going to take my 5 to 7%. But if I don't get that job, I am out zero.
Yeah.
But I can't say that with a sales rep. I can't say that with my plumbers. I can't say that with my internet. I can't make that guarantee with any of them. The
Hmm.
other guarantee I can't make is, am I going to get paid from the job? I go do a job for a plumber. What if the homeowner hoses me and doesn't pay? Right? That's not a good deal. Or if I get an internet lead and yes, it was a job that went through, but for whatever reason, the homeowner doesn't pay me. Those are all really bad scenarios because now I've lost out. It's kind of a double whammy. With TPAs, you're generally always going to get paid because that's part of the contract. And most of the time, they're going to pay you directly into your bank account, which makes your collections and your AR 1,000 times better. So I think there are some real safety nets that you get with a TPA that I am willing to say I'll take the headache, knowing some of the benefits that are going to come with that. So I think those are things that everybody really needs to keep in mind. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, what are the cons of the TPA? Just so I'm being fair. Well, they're obvious, right? We don't like the nitpicking. We have to follow their procedures on a lot of stuff, so we feel like we can't bill for things that we should be billing for. But once again, I think there's workarounds to that. And the other one that I really think, and this is going to be controversial, I think all the contractors will agree with me, is that this is another way for insurance to dictate the outcome of everything. TPAs are dictating the outcome. And they'll always say it's not price fixing, but I do get concerned going, look at how many new TPAs are out there, right? Just from even 5 years ago, new ones keep popping up, and insurance carriers are going to keep using them because they're the ones that are saying, hey, I need you to save me money.
Hmm.
And if you don't think TPAs are trying to save insurance carriers money, we're fooling ourselves. We all know that's the purpose. So I kind of feel like I tell people to join a TPA, but I also feel like I'm supporting the devil in a system that might actually run us out of being able to be profitable at some point. That's a fear, right?
Yeah.
So that would be something that's great. I'm supporting it because I do think it's a good idea to get on them, but I'm like, man, if I support them too much, they'll keep squeezing till the blood comes out of us till there's nothing left, or that's how we feel, right? So that would be a concern that I say is down the road that we have to look at. But on the positive side of joining a TPA, and this is the one you and I talked about, and most people never think about this or talk about it. We did a lot of TPA work, but the biggest reason I wanted to get on the TPA work is because as a marketer and as a salesperson, I could go visit all of my insurance agents and tell them that I was part of their preferred vendor network. When I first started my company, we did not get a single assignment from any TPA ever, probably for like 2 or 3 years. But because I was on the TPA program, I went to every agent, State Farm, Farmers, Allstate, and said, hey, by the way, we're a preferred vendor. And what I did by doing that is I cut the TPA off at the foot because I went directly to the source who was going to call me first before a claim ever got called in, and that was the insurance agent.
Hmm.
And so what happened is I started getting work from my insurance agents, and that meant I was stealing work from other companies that were on TPA programs who were sitting back hoping they were going to get assignments. I was now getting those direct assignments from the agent instead of waiting for the TPA. So in that situation, this is 15, 16 years ago, ServPro, ServiceMaster had all those national contracts and they kind of were fed. They were in a good spot. They would just get their jobs that would just come through. Well, I was the disruptor in my area because those guys started getting less assignments because I was now getting the job directly from the agent, which means it never had a chance to really make it to the ServPros or the ServiceMasters of the world. So I would tell people, even if you don't want to deal with the TPA stuff, get on the program so you can say you're a preferred vendor and then go market all of your agents because that is a really big selling point to these agents. They want to know, are you a preferred vendor? And they want to know that the adjuster is not going to call and yell at them for referring you out because you're a non-approved vendor. Once you're approved, adjusters really shouldn't be talking bad about you. They should go, oh, they're an approved vendor. That's fine. So
Hmm.
I think that's the part that a lot of people forget about when they join these is I didn't get assignments from TPAs. Now, eventually, as we got bigger, we did get assignments, but starting out, we just cherry picked everything directly from the agents because of that.
Well, I would say too, another important thing to consider is going and building those relationships as well, right? Like it plays so many different roles. And I will say too, to your point, it could be a couple years before you actually get jobs, but leverage it in your own benefit for your business, but also to build your community in that area too. You're servicing the people that you live around, right?
Yes.
And so there's a really cool way to really leverage being on the vendor program. And if work isn't coming, you have to go out and get your own work, right? That's
Yeah.
no different than what you're doing day to day. To your point, salesperson, marketer, that's part of their job anyway, but why sit back and wait for the jobs to come to you, especially if you know you're really not guaranteed any work, honestly, to your point. And so
Yeah.
you've got to get creative with the way that you do things. And I think it's really important for people to understand TPAs will always fit into your business one way or another, whether you're getting work from them consistently or not, or you're getting jobs here and there when it's a little bit slower, whatever the case may be. It's going to be part of your business, but also leverage it, right? You're obviously doing something right if you're on program work and you're recognized as a vendor. So leverage that to your own,
Yes.
willpower for your business. So looking ahead, are TPAs likely to remain? I know people say this all the time, gatekeepers, but we really know what we're signing up for, so I don't really think they're gatekeepers, but are they likely to remain a crucial part or a huge part of our business, or will contractors, who control their own data, marketing, and outcomes hold the leverage in the long term? Of course, this is very crystal ballish. Of course, I always try and
Yeah.
end our podcast that way, but I think you said something earlier that kind of brought this up is, we know that we're getting squeezed and it's on all aspects of the business, whether you're on program work or not, we are getting squeezed every day. And so, we have to look at that and say, where do we see the future of the industry and how we leverage TPAs or not? Do you think more and more people will kind of scale back the work that they're doing with TPAs, but still be part of them? Or what do you think that's going to be in the next 5 years or so?
Great crystal ball question. I read a report. If we were to just look at the number of claims that went through TPA, and this was about a year ago, so the numbers are going to change. I think they said 20% of all claims went through a TPA, like carrier program. And
Hmm.
I think they said within a year or two, it'd be up to 30%, which you got to
Wow.
realize 10% increase is a lot. Uh, right now, the number is not going to go down. It's going to go up. More and more jobs are going to go through TPAs because carriers, it's the only insurance will never lose. Let's just be honest. They will never lose. This is still the way for them to control. You think about if you take a company that does nothing but plumber work, they're paying the plumber off. They're literally intercepting that job before insurance ever gets notified. Insurance carriers hate that because they can no longer control the outcome and the cost. So what are they doing? They're setting up all of these TPAs. They're trying to get all this stuff because insurance needs to be the first one that gets notified when something happens because that will allow them to dictate and control the outcome versus a plumber or the internet, right? Where we're paying them. So they're doing everything that they can to try to intercept and stop those jobs from occurring, in my opinion. Right.
Mhm.
So you will see TPA work continue to go up because of those factors alone, because that's how they can control costs. And it's how that they can also control good contractors on work. Generally speaking, some people will disagree with me, but if we're doing the plumber bribery game, I think there would be a general consensus that most people would say those restoration companies are probably charging a significant amount more for their jobs than somebody who's not paying that game because they've got to justify those costs, right? So that means that the insurance is paying out more. That means that you have more shadiness, if you want to call it whatever that is, right? And so yeah, insurance TPAs, they're gonna keep getting stronger and stronger, in my opinion, no matter what. Now, what does that mean for us? The problem is, and even with my company, before we sold, you started to see it, is that because there's so many TPAs and we have so many contractors getting on them now, the number of claims that even the big guys are getting is getting diminished because so many people are joining the TPAs all at once. How do you send enough jobs to that many contractors? So a lot of my clients, they do get on and they're like, Nate, I haven't seen a job and it's been 6 months. And it's like, yeah, that's not good because you joined it thinking you're going to get work, but there's just so many contractors getting on it. So yet again, insurance doesn't care, right? They're just going, hey, this is still another way that we get to control things, at the end of the day. So Yes, I'm going to say you still need to get on them for sure because one job's better than none or two jobs. But I will also say we have got to learn as an industry and as restoration professionals. I'm always going to build off of relationships more than I am off of TPAs or internet. None of that's guaranteed. And that's
Mhm.
why I built the relationships with insurance agents, is because if the TPA kicks me off tomorrow, I just have lost all of that work. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to lose all of my insurance agents' work because it's a relationship. I'm not going to lose my property managers because it's a relationship, unless I totally screw up. Then I might, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that means it was my fault, not a TPA just saying, hey, we're going to change our programs. You're now off of the program. That happens all the time, right? I mean, we look at contractor connection. USAA was loyal to them for how many years? And then they says, we're going to go with AccuServe and we're actually going to try our own program a little bit. Contractor Connection did not like that. We as contractors who were getting all of our assignments from USAA, and we were one of them, our workload dropped drastically. Not because we were a bad contractor, but because somebody at the top made a decision and all of a sudden we lost some of that work. I don't have control over that. I
Yeah.
never will.
Well, I think that's just like the nature of the beast. Unfortunately, we know that businesses are ever evolving. There's going to be decisions that affect you positive and negatively in your
Absolutely.
business, right? And we all know it's no secret that claims volume is down. And so with claims volumes going down and then a 10% increase of going through TPAs, that's very interesting to kind of see how it all works and the way things are shifting. It's not to say in a couple of years, it's back down to 20 or 10%
Sure.
because that can happen. But
Yep.
just the lay of the land right now is the important thing is you need to understand, right? Understand what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
Understand that you may not get business. And I mean, honestly, you had a great point. Everybody's trying to join TPA, which means we're already fighting an uphill battle with claims being down, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
and to your point, I think it's also really depending on what area you're in, you can have a really saturated area or an undersaturated area, which can also give you a lot of work or no work. That's just the nature of the beast. I talked to somebody a year ago at RIA and she mentioned that they signed up for a TPA and she's like, well, we hadn't gotten any work yet. And I said, well, where are you located? And she said, Florida. And I was like, I mean, that's a
Yeah.
hard market, right? So I think
Yep.
that's the other thing to really consider. And to your point, there's pros and cons to
Yep.
TPAs. There's pros and cons to everything we do in our business every single day. This one I think is just a little bit more of a touchy subject because some people live and die on the hill or it's yes or no.
Yeah.
Can't have a middle ground. And I think that there is a true middle ground here. We've just had a discussion around it, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of funny, and I definitely agree. There is middle ground with it, but I'll have contractors go, no, I hate TPAs because of all the requirements. I'm like, okay, great. And then I go, okay, so just tell me when you're doing a job that goes through insurance and you have to deal with an adjuster, is it a pain in the butt dealing with all the stuff they want? They'll always say, yes, it's a pain in the butt. And I go,
Mhm.
okay. So if you're dealing with a pain in the butt with insurance, non-TPA, what's the difference of dealing with pain in the butt, TPA? It's a pain in the butt either way, right? Because adjusters are still asking for a lot of the similar things that you would be getting from a TPA. So I think there's a pain in the butt with the internet. There's a pain in the butt with plumbers. There's a pain in the butt with insurance agents directly. You just have to decide all of them are going to have pain points, but if that's the case, get out of the business,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we got in because we saw opportunity. We got
Yeah.
in because we saw good financial return. Some of us got in because we truly want to help people. If you
Yep.
think about it, the heart of our business is still helping people on the worst day of their lives.
Yes.
So if those are the reasons we got in, then there's going to be problems on every side of it, no matter what. But that's business 101, right? So there's part of me that goes, we have to grow up and just go, look, guys, TPA or not, I got pain in the butt factors no matter what vertical I'm working with. There will always be that. Are you willing to deal with those? And are you willing to diversify your company so that you can say, yes, I'm well-rounded and I get it from all areas? And that's where I think I really try to push with people is to go, if you're too close-minded, you will eventually lose.
Hmm.
And I've
Yeah,
seen
that's
it.
a great point.
I've seen a lot of companies go out of business because they were too stuck in the mud to want to evolve. And I'm like, guys, our industry is evolving faster now, in my opinion, in the last 3 to 4 years than it's ever evolved before, by far.
It really has. And I will say too, I think we oftentimes forget that most times when we're talking to TPAs or adjusters, they really don't even understand fully the process of what we do. And so it's always going to be maybe a thorn in your side because you do have to explain why you're doing things or what documentation you did document and didn't and things like that because they don't understand the process. They're trying to make sure that their client's taken care of within reasonable means, right? That's
Yes.
the end goal. They're trying to make sure that the customer is taken care of, so are we, but we need to be able to tell a story and justify our means. And it's a hard game. It's a slippery slope because we don't fully understand what they do, just like
Yep.
they don't fully understand what we do. And sometimes I think that falls kind of on deaf ears on all sides, not one
Sure.
side or the other. And
Yep.
so, when we're thinking about it, there's always going to be pain points in the business, period. To your point, your plumbers, I mean, HVAC, your internet. I remember years ago when like a Google lead was like a couple $100 and it was like so expensive. And now it's
Yeah.
like $1,000+. We have no control over that, right? We have
None.
zero control over that. And to your point, you're taking a lot of monetary risks with, internet leads
Yeah.
and, referral sources and things like that. So again, we're going to have pain points in the day to day, regardless of what route we go. So why not just take it at face value and say, hey, we're going to have pain points. What do we as a business want to tackle and how do we want to handle it? Right. Because to your point, I mean, business is business. You're going to have pain points all the time. It's like you said, make the choices. Do you want to deal with it or not? And what does that mean for your business, right?
Well, it's funny. I think Jeff Moore, right, had said this. So, Jeff, you can thank me for, bringing this up. And I felt this. I just never got a chance to say it publicly. But there was some article or something that he was on, maybe it was with you, where he looked at the past 15 years of our industry. And he looked at TPAs, what we pay out. He looked at plumbers, what we pay out. And he looked at internet leads, what we paid out. TPAs have always been 5 to 7% for the last 15, 20 years.
Mhm.
Hasn't changed. You look at an internet lead, you just brought it up. I remember when they were $100, probably even cheaper, right, for an
Yeah.
internet lead. And in the last 5 years, if you've gone from $100 to $1,000, you look at that increase. So you can say, well, TPAs is joining the devil. I go, okay, great. But you're also supporting the devil when you pay $1,000 to Google. Because what does that tell Google? If they're willing to pay 1,000, they're probably willing to pay 1,200. And if
Yeah.
they're willing to pay 1,200, they're going to pay 1,500. You look at plumbers, I was paying $100, $150 to my plumbers for a job. Where you live and where I live and in Arizona, you're 1,500, 2,000.
Yeah.
That's like 100% increase in less than 5 years. So I go, guess what? We're supporting the devil on that side as well. And we can't sustain that. That's a price, so which one do you want to support?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you broke that down really well. And yes, I do remember when Jeff spoke about that because it is very true, right? There's things that we can control and not control. And, who would you rather pay 5 to 7% consistently for the next 10 or 15 years? Or would you like to
Yeah.
play this game of who has the most money and can pay the most for their leads, right? Because that's really what it comes down to. And, things are constantly changing in the internet space and even the referral space, right? I mean, look at some of the markets like that we're in. We're close to metropolitan areas that the competition is endless. So the
Yes.
pricing is just going to keep on
Yeah.
increasing over time, right? And so what does
Yes.
that mean? To your point, it's not sustainable. So, for those of you listening, we hope you gained a ton. Nate and I talked about this quite a bit a couple of weeks ago, and we were just like, we need to really talk about this to the industry because I think it's a burning question. And most times when somebody comes into the industry, that's the question, TPA or no TPA.
Yeah.
And, again, there's a happy middle ground. So thank you, Nate, so much for coming on and having this discussion with me. I truly appreciate it. And for all of you watching, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Ask the Expert. Take care.
Thanks.